Restaurant, and I'm very pleased to say my guest today is an old friend of the program. We call on him whenever there's a crisis. Hanif Benjamin, a clinical therapist and trauma specialist. Hanif, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we're in a sort of a time, once again in this country, Hanif, where we have a high level of crime and people are, let's be honest about it, traumatized.
Correct.
Crime can have a deep social, profoundly deep social impact, can't it?
Correct. Now, when you look at crime and you look at sociologists and criminologists, especially people like Merton and stuff, who, the theories that we use and study, it speaks to a level of chaos, confusion, panic. And now, over the years, we've always had crime in Trinidad and Tobago, but we're at a place where it's not just about the criminals and the criminal activities, but it is more so about society as a whole. Because I think as a country, we are feeling it. As a country, we are experiencing it. Back then, a crime could happen and you would read about it and it's not so close to comfort. But I think we're at a place where it is now climbing over our high walls, it is now reaching into our private lives, and it is now interrupting our daily functioning. And I think when we get to that level, we know that we have a society that is dealing with a level of crises and of course a level of trauma that seemingly we cannot get out of.
Well, now that I've got my mic on, I should be able to be heard better to talk to you. But the fact that, is it really possible that a society can reach a point with crime and with the psychological impact of crime where it starts to spiral and get worse and worse and worse?
But I think, Vernon, we are at that place. We are at that place. Now, when you look, and I'm glad that you brought up the point about the psychological impact of crime. Again, in this country, we seldom focus on the mind. We seldom focus on the psychological impact of anything. And so we have a country that is dealing with a number of incidences. Like, we have Zika, that is quite worrying. We have an economic downturn, for want of a better term, a recession. We are literally feeling it. We have where we're seeing murders on the rise constantly. We're seeing where other types of criminal activities are on the rise. We're seeing a country that is faced with a difficult period. I mean, everyone in Trinidad and Tobago can agree that we are dealing with a difficult period. Now, when you put the pressure of crime in that mix, when everyone is already trying to survive all the other things, you find where we have a serious level of crises and trauma, and with that come a level of psychological torture that we are going through, where people are feeling anxious every day, where people are changing their lifestyle and their mode of going and coming, where people are trying to protect themselves and their family by any means necessary, where people are fighting to survive, literally, Vernon. So when you look at all of these culmination onto the country, we're seeing where we're at a really, really difficult time, and it seems to be getting worse and worse.
So basically what you're saying is we're in a perfect storm of uncertainty. People are uncertain about their health, if they're going to get Zika,
Correct.
as you mentioned. They're uncertain about what their job, whether they're going to have a job
Correct.
next week, or if their family will have food on the table. Mm-hmm. And then they're uncertain about whether they'll be alive
Correct.
because of crime.
Correct. So I want you to imagine those, just let's look at those three factors. And I want you to think about the pressure that would put on any individual mind. I want you to think about those three and think about the pressure it will put on any individual family, more so a family that is already struggling. I want you to also think about how that will impact that of our children and adolescents, how it is they understand this thing, how it is they navigate it, what it is we're telling our children, how are we explaining what is going on to our children, in relation to the economic factor, how are we telling our children that we can no longer enjoy the things that we used to, in terms of criminal activities, how are we telling our children that we can no longer go to place and enjoy the things that we used to. And when you talk about health, how can we say to our children and our family, I will protect you from the mosquitoes that are a billion a dozen? How are we dealing with those level of stressors? And I keep stressing on the word stressors because, Vernon, from all our conversation in the past, once we are stressed out and seemingly we cannot cope with the level of stress, we have what is now known as some serious mental illness starting to bear its head. You see, and then if we put in the mix people who are predisposed already, people who have low threshold to dealing with stress, people who are already dealing with severe mental illness or just mental illness on a whole. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we know that is quite a high number. And that is what the bleak picture of what we are in fact dealing with in this country right now.
So I would imagine then psychologically that level of stress, that level of uncertainty, that level of just confusion about what's going on around us can in fact, as you said there, feed into creating more crime because people
Correct.
snap easier.
Correct.
They react.
No, you say snap and react, and that is quite correct. That is a local term we would use, but people are very hyper vigilant. Right, they're jumpy, they're jumpy, because you literally don't know. You don't know if you go to work this morning and you're going to be told that you don't have a work tomorrow. You don't know if you'll go to work tomorrow and be told that your salary has to be cut in half. You know, how are you going to already make, in terms of your bills, that is already way over the salary you was getting before. So you're talking about a level of anxiety. And if you look at Trinidad and Tobago, we are an anxious people. We are anxious by the way we speak, by the way we interact with one another, by the way we drive on the roads. We are seemingly an anxious people. And when you look at anxiety as a diagnosis, you're talking about a number of things. You know, you're not able to sleep well, right? You're not able to eat well, or eating too much. Either way, your eating pattern has been thrown off. You start to lose weight or put on weight depending on what level of stress you're dealing with. You're talking about heart and palpitation and sweaty and all those level of things.
And substance abuse, I guess, as well.
And well, that is where I'm going now. You see, Fernand, because once these things start stepping into place, we then start to develop coping mechanisms. And when we look at coping mechanisms in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the world, there's a feel-good coping mechanism, which is negative in instance, but it's feel-good, meaning if I use it or I do it, I would feel good. So you're talking about substance abuse. When I say substance abuse, both legal and illegal substances. So if there's a rise in illegal substances, definitely you know that criminality and criminal conduct as it relates to these illegal substances will be on the rise, definitely. So there is a demand. So obviously with anything, if there is a demand, the people out there who supply are going to be fighting among themselves to supply the largest amount to the larger number of population. You see, then we're talking about you know, the feel-good sex and sexual activities. So you're talking about these hotel and brothels and all these different type of behavior. You know, then you're talking about, with that, Vernon, the secondary adversities. We're talking about now domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, because again, the level of frustration is so great. So now you can't deal with it, you can't cope, you're trying to cope with feel good, so it means that you have to take more and more to keep feeling good, and so you find the trickle-down effect of abuse, and because now your level or your threshold, you know, has been reduced somewhat, so you're easy to get mad. So somebody gives you a bad rep, and we have seen it. So you think, the report in the newspaper the other day, the young man leaned on a car, and allegedly he was killed for leaning on a car. I mean, that is where we reach. That's where we reach, where people cussing you and carrying on without a care in the world. And for now, we cannot help but add social media in the mix, because you see the venom coming through social media as well. You see the hate and the anger of society being perpetrated onto social media, whether it is people venting on their own or they're pushing that level of venomous hate onto other persons within our society.
Social media is really interesting, and we've spoken about it before, but it sort of taps into the most elemental and perhaps base sort of part of our humanity, which is our urge to just lash out and react to something with no considered thought.
Correct. And somehow, Vernon, we believe that being on social media gives us that authority, right? Because no one is...
It's a pulpit.
Correct. No one is saying to us that with social media comes a level of responsibility. No one is saying to our children and the adults, you know, that we should look at social media with an air of moral and values. Just as you would have a conversation face to face, is the same level of values and morals one should take when you're having it on social media. As a matter of fact, face to face it will be you and I, but when I put it up on social media, it's billions and billions of people in a world wide web where it will never be removed. You see? So, but Vernon, it speaks to a level of frustration as well. It speaks to a level of frustration where people feel as if the only place their voices can be heard is through social media. And what is quite interesting, and the argument can go both ways, we have young people now becoming involved in the conversation. We want young people to be involved in the conversation. However, the adults are lacking, or they are not helping the young people have what is known as a responsible level of conversation. So you have disrespect and libel and all sorts of things happening on that. But it culminates, Vernon, to where we are as a society. Where we are as a society. And right now, Trinidad and Tobago spinning. Right now, we are at a difficult place, a very, very difficult place. And so we must look for solutions. And unfortunately, the people who we ought to be looking at are not stepping out there and giving us solutions. And that is a major challenge that we face. Now, crises are normal. You know, again, Merton, these people, they spoke about it, Marx, you know, these things need to happen. Crime, punishment, I mean, all of these things need to happen. However, the challenge for us would be, Vernon, the people who are charged with the responsibilities to help us guide this process is seemingly absent. So our children are left to their own devices most times to figure out what this is. What is Trinidad? What's really going on? And we leave them to their own devices to find their place within a society when there are so many competing elements for their attention. We have gangs, Vernon. We have positive groups. Now, I did a training in Tobago, and one of the activities on that training was, you know, I separated a group and I had them do it in secrecy. Why our young people join gangs and why our young people join positive groups? And 98% of the results are the same. They join gangs because they want to feel loved and belong. They join these positive groups for the same reason. They join gang because somebody seems to be a leader that is guiding them. And they join positive groups for the same reason. So the question is, Vernon, why aren't we creating enough positive spaces for our young people to come? And why are we leaving it up to the gangs to recruit day and night? Why our spaces are limited to people and or geographic location, and why it is our gangs are recruiting throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Those are some of the key questions that we need to be asking ourselves in relation to, you know, our children and adolescents and what they do and how they do it.
So I suppose an analogy could be made then that basically our kids are on a boat that's hit some rough waters, and they're willing to put up with the journey and the roughness and maybe seasickness, as long as they know that somebody is at the rudder.
Correct. And I think that is perfect.
So that they can navigate towards more peaceful waters at some point.
Correct. Because Vernon, adolescents are exactly what you described, tipsy-turvy. They're on a rocky boat. That is just how the brain develops. You see, the amygdala that is responsible for fear and fight and all these kind of things, that develops first in adolescence. And here it is, the part of the brain that is responsible for calmness and judgment, that develops last in our adolescence. So by nature, Vernon, they are risk takers. But when we look at risk, Vernon, we keep looking at negative risk. And I say to people when I teach that there are both positive and negative risk. A young person taking 8 C.F.T subjects in school and taking 4 privately, that's a positive risk. A young person going into some type of sporting activity on a weekend, that is a positive risk, something more than. And just as they are excited to go there, they will be excited to go to the gangs. So again, they are on a boat drifting. We as the adult must create the avenue where they will drift to us, where they will drift to positive things. So So when you tie that into crime and criminal activities, you find where we are giving our young people enough opportunities to go the wrong way. We are creating opportunities for them to go the negative ways, whether it is in the school or communities. And the reason why we are doing that, because we have abnegated our responsibility to just provide, just provide adequate activities, adequate spaces for positive interaction. Now, I'm not saying we don't have positive interaction in Trinidad and Tobago, because we have a lot of youth programs and stuff. However, we have to look at it holistically. This has to be a movement, and that is what we're not having. We have pockets of these things happening, and what we need to have is a systemic approach when it relates to positive youth development, dealing with how we treat with our children and adolescents from a positive standpoint. I'm talking about from preschool, starting to build and inculcate within them a level of positive attitude, positive mindset, positive spaces. What just happened with our July-August vacation coming to an end this week? What can we say as a country we would have done nationwide for our children and adolescents? We had a camp here and a camp here. We have religious camps going on here. But what can we say as a country through a policy document that we would have done for all of our children? We have young people looking for work up, right, and down. We have people who want things to do. And if we don't give them that positive thing to do for them, trust and believe, they will fall into something else.
So in that sense, celebrating Independence Day becomes almost ironic, doesn't it? Because we are in a society now where there's so much confusion, so much distrust. And let's talk about distrust, because to me, one of the great things about the youth is that it's a trusting period of our lives.
Correct.
Yet, we have young people now watching the TV, seeing 11 murders in a weekend, 9 murders in a weekend, 9-year-olds being gunned down. That creates an inherent level of distrust,
correct,
doesn't it? So they're losing a part of their childhood.
Correct. Not just a level of distrust, but again, a distrust in the people and or institutions that are charged with the responsibility to help develop those trusts. And one thing about young people, when you see, they know quite early what it gives. You can't fool them. We think as adults we can fool young people, but that don't happen. They see right through all the shenanigans. They see through it. So you're talking about a level of distrust that is developed societal-wide. So if you are growing up with a level of distrust, then who would you trust? You would trust the people in your circle, meaning adolescents like yourselves. And if the adolescents like yourselves are not in a positive way, then you will follow that of the negative way. That is just what it is. So that is why I'm saying, as the people who are charged with the responsibility to develop a level of trust, a level of security, whether it is by words and or by deeds, are seemingly failing at this, because we are in a country that is spiraling and people are dizzy. We are dizzy and we want a comforting word. We want to know that something is being done. But what you have happening in the last months, years even, is those negative elements seem to be speaking the loudest within the society.
So how do we get past that then? I mean, as adults, well, seemingly adults in many cases, how do we get past it to the point where we are actually a good example for young people and give them that sense of guidance and direction?
The first thing for that we need to look at, in my humble estimation, we need to speak to our young people. We don't speak to them enough. And when we do speak with them, we're telling them what we want them to do. That don't work. We want to develop a partnership where our young people can in fact sit around the table and have meaningful conversations. And once you recognize young people are part of the process, they buy into it. And they tell their friends, and their friends tell their friends, and they all buy into it. The second thing we need to look at, Vernon, is our school system. Because seemingly we are failing horribly at our school system. Now, when you listen to the Minister of Education give the result for CXC, and don't quote me on this, but about 50% did not get a full certificate. Now, in the 50 that got the full certificate, how many got ones and twos, 1, 2s and 3s? So it means then that somewhere along the line in our educating of our children, we are in fact failing. Because 50% in an exam is an F. That is just pure and simple. That is not Hanif, man. That is just what it is. Every university, every school will give you an F for 50. Now, it means then that we need to take a look at our education system and what exactly are we developing there. Because you see, what we develop there will in fact be what is out here in society. So we need to look at our school system and put systems in place where we can create equal opportunity for all children to be part of some type of positive interaction. I'm calling on the Minister of Education to bring in a level of volunteerism into our school system. As a matter of fact, you should get at least 20 to 30 hours before you can write the CXC. That should be a prerequisite. You know, when you get into A levels, you should have, well, Cape now, you should have a level of volunteerism that you must complete. We need to get these things back.
So that's social responsibility being introduced into school.
Because again, Vernon, we are asking our young people to take up responsibility in our society when no one is teaching them how to do it. You don't go to a university of adolescent. You see, I take my cues from you, the adult. So if you as the adult is not giving me the cues, I will do whatever I can within my own cognitive ability. And because I'm an adolescent, my cognitive ability will not be fully developed. You see? So what you see in our young people, inadvertently, is you and I. That is what it is. Because they take their cues from us. So you need to go into our school system and create levels and programs within the school that is not just about academia, but that can holistically develop a young person so that when they reach the age of 18, whether they decide to go on to Cape or they go on to some other level of education or no education at all, and 18 is where they come out and they have to work, because we have to face it. Not everybody can afford to go on to Cape while we think education is free. One book in Cape is quite expensive, and not everybody, will go there. So we have to cater for the ones that will go on to Cape, for those that will come out and try to fit into the world of work, and we will look for those who will look for alternative education means, for example, trade and stuff like that. We need to cater for those three categories of people coming out of school. So it means that we have to develop them. You have these people going into university clueless. They don't know what they're about. And while that is okay to some degree, a level of development had to take place. And we're lacking that in our school system. So we need to start from primary school, Vernon, with programs that will help our children to develop holistically, not just math and English. And if we go in based on math and English, well, the CXC result telling us exactly what we have been doing.
That was really, even the minister said those were our weakest areas.
Yes.
Math and language skills.
It tells us. And what is amazing, math and English can be learned through many means. Many
But whatever the means we're using, obviously it's not working as well as it should.
So at some point, we need to say to ourselves, we are in fact failing our youth. If we fail our youth, we are in fact failing the future generations.
We have about 2 minutes left for this part of the interview. We'll continue with the second part, of course, as usual when you're here.
Definitely.
But I want to go back to the mention of volunteerism that you had there. That had never occurred to me, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of young people feel they're separate and apart from the rest of society. They don't feel part of anything.
Yes.
They're in the school system and the society is out there. Whereas if we look at progressive societies, people feel that even young people feel they're part of the fabric of society.
Correct. So what that does, Vernon, let me tell you, just picture this, and I want the viewers to picture this with me. A young person is volunteering from probably Form 3 coming up, and they are in fact volunteering in organizations. So they are from very early, they are seeing how organizations are run. They are seeing the do's and don'ts. They are seeing professionals. They are being around professionals. So you can imagine when they get to the age of 18, what you will have leaving school. You will have a young person who would have experience things that they would not ordinarily experience. So you're talking about a certain level of professionalism, a certain level of mindset. And then we want to complain about customer service, and we want to complain about this. So they all ties in to our level of volunteerism and our level of training and development from quite early.
And even as it relates to how young people can be quite callous about those who are disadvantaged or people who are elderly, if they're exposed to working with those people, they'll have a better, I would imagine, understanding.
Compassion. Yeah. So you would find young people who are developing more compassion. They would help more. They would give more. They would take a more active role in your society, Vernon. And that is what we are not having. We have our adults on one side, and we have our children on one side of the divide, and none shall meet in the middle. Because the young people are saying, like, you don't understand me, you don't know me, and the older ones are saying, well, you don't understand me and you don't know me, so we have this big void in the middle. Mm-hmm. And everybody just shouting across at one another, and our society is stumped.
And your position is that it's not just a nice idea that we should have volunteerism, it should be part of the curriculum.
Yes, it must be part of the curriculum.
Even to progress, you have to have a certain number of volunteer hours.
Correct. I worked in the United States system and in the school system, and before you could write your final regents, you must demonstrate 10 hours of community service in your final year. You must. Even at what we call our primary school, leaving into secondary school, you would call it from grades 1 to 8. You must have 5 hours of volunteerism work. I mean, and it's amazing how young people are taking to this. Not only that, then that volunteerism lead into the summer work program or the July-August work program. So from your level of volunteerism now, you're getting young people to start to work during the July-August to give them practical skills.
They're getting life skills, yeah.
Of course. I mean, and I'll just make this one point before we wrap. You have an 18-year-old boy with no education telling you want $40 an hour. And I'm asking, well, how you plan to do that? Mm-hmm. Because you have no concept of work, you have no concept of value for work, and you have no concept of value for work for money.
Hanif, Benjamin of the Center for Human Development, it's always enlightening having you in the program. We'll continue this conversation another day. But in the meantime, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so kindly.
Thank you very much. You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.